A More Beautiful Life podcast, recognizing, appreciating, and integrating earliest life experiences. There are times in our lives when we all yearn for something. More contact with others, a special relationship, a better job, more time to oneself, more respect, more love, more support, or, well, anything. It can all be summed up in wanting a more beautiful life. You just fill in the blank for what equals beauty for you. My specialty is healing our earliest traumas to discover our truest nature. I've been working at understanding this paradigm for a long time, since 1999, when a client remembered her birth during a craniosacral session. She explained to me that she felt healing her birth experience would relieve her lifelong depression. That experience took hold of me with such passion so that years later I'm filling in the gap between our ancestral past and our present lives with recognition of our earliest life experiences starting preconception. It involves appreciating how we adapted to our difficulties, and then integrating any overwhelming experiences into our current lives. Welcome to A More Beautiful Life. This podcast includes luminaries from the fields of infant mental health, prenatal and perinatal psychology, colleagues and experts in trauma resolution, advanced body workers, clients who want to share their stories, authors of pivotal books and articles, and people who, in my opinion, have sought out a more beautiful life. Join me, Kate White, and our honored guest as we explore a more beautiful life. Enjoy. Today on the show, I have Dr. Abi Blakeslee. Dr. Abi Blakeslee integrates somatic experiencing with clinical research, the psychobiological principles of attachment, psychodynamic therapy, and somatic bodywork in her practice and teaching. She has conducted original research on the role of implicit memory in somatic experiencing with a committee that included Dr. Dan Siegel. Dr. Blakeslee holds a Master's of Arts in Counseling and Depth Psychology and a PhD in Clinical and Somatic Psychology. She is interested in the intersection between neuroscience, current trauma research, and the psychological principles of somatic experiencing. She works with individuals, couples, children, and families and treats a broad base of issues. Dr. Blakeslee currently resides in Bozeman, Montana with her husband, 2 young boys, and a young daughter. She focuses on providing faculty-level, individual, and group consultations to all levels of somatic experiencing students, teaching SE trainings and somatic workshops, and presenting at professional conferences. So welcome to a special edition of our A More Beautiful Life podcast. I have back with me my friend and colleague, Abi Blakeslee, and we're going to have a conversation today because we get started talking about the things that we love, helping people understand their autonomic nervous system, especially in the context of birth and our earliest layers of experience. And we realize we have so much more that we'd like to share with you. And so it's with great delight I welcome you back, Abi Blakeslee.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here and wonderful to share with all of you.
Yeah, so we are going to talk a little bit about what happens for us as practitioners coming in. And we're offering a training coming up in November around the impacts of birth interventions on families. And so today we just wanted to explore a few of the questions that we have been thinking of. And we want to invite you to send us in more questions if you have them out there. So our first question that we're chewing on right now is, what is the role of the autonomic nervous system and the physiology of stress and threat response before, during, and after birth? So I'm wondering, Abi, would you like to go first, or would you like me to respond first? Or
How about you respond first, and then I can fill in?
Mhm. Well, I thought a lot about this question. I mean, this is what my training is built around. And so the before is really significant. And in my training, I teach all these layers of experience. And one of them is, well, is there developmental trauma, or is there any shock trauma in the person before they get pregnant or as they head towards birth? And so that's a significant piece, just helping people understand their own patterns of how they are with themselves, with their families, and what their responses are in their bodies. And then as they head towards birth, are they afraid of childbirth? I mean, there is a natural tendency in some people to be afraid of births or hospitals or doctors. They all have official names and diagnostic categories, but they do exist. And so helping people really understand their autonomic nervous system as they head towards this event, this amazing threshold event. And what are their concerns and fears, and what happens in their bodies when they consider what are any variations of a story that they might have as they head toward birth. And many people get locked in to an idea about how they want their birth to go, especially if they're accomplished, professional, used to working hard and getting results. And birth doesn't work like that. Often you can prepare, but there are deeper mysteries and some a form of relaxation that comes in the face of challenge. And then the last part of it is afterbirth, because many times during births, there can be this amazing need. Of course, those of us who attend births know that you have to feel safe in your body to open. So really working to create that feeling of safety. And that's what childbirth preparation will do. And that's what a doula or your medical provider, hopefully, will do to help you feel safe in the space. So what I am curious about is trying to help providers catch cues from their patients or clients around, do they feel safe in the space? And how can you create that for them? And then catching them afterwards, which is, I mean, I think I'll wait on the answer to that part, but I mean, I think that's enough to get us started. Abby, how about you?
Yeah, I really appreciate sort of the arc of time that you're moving forward, and that is really important. Is even preconception or right around the time of conception, there's kind of the more of the epigenetics, or even you in your womb experience right now as the mother or the birthing parent, right? These are things that are going to be implicitly or kind of non-consciously held. And I smiled when you were talking about that birth will, in some ways, it is a journey.
Mm-hmm.
And we may have well laid out plans. And so with my first birth, I had my birth plan that I wrote out very copiously. And it was great to think about many of the different variables. But what actually ended up happening was very different, because in the moment I felt so differently than I did from when I first wrote those notes. I was in a different part of my brain, really, and my physiology was in a place that I had never quite journeyed to before.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think about physiology, one of the things that I'm really curious about in teaching mothers and birthing parents and caregivers, families, is can they learn how to check inside at various times? What are the sensations that I feel in any given moment in my eyes, in my tongue, in my esophagus, in my lungs, in my chest, in my belly, in my hips, in my legs, in my extremities? And learning how to notice things like temperature, flow, tingling, vibration. Um, this is the language of the autonomic nervous system. So when we talk about, what is that moment when you find out that you're carrying a life? For many people, it's excitement. What's the felt sense of excitement? For others, there may be trepidation,
Right.
right? A mixture of curiosity, but maybe some concern, or um, there could be complexity around it too, right? So then there might be some more constriction or holding along with the sensation of movement or flow. So, these kinds of internal states would be things, whether it's before, during, carrying the baby, and then after, that teaching people, bringing, and also providers of how to engage in this so that we know what's there, and then we can attend to a shift, right, through tracking or being with, or shifting attention between various states to allow there to be some kind of a new state that emerges. It is another state of birth, really, the nervous system. And in moving from anywhere where there is trauma, which we would think of maybe some more fixity in the nervous system, to a state where there's more flow or flexibility. And the more prep work that you can do prior to birth, so that even in the surprise, you can move with the unknown,
Yes.
right? And move through these various, very large states of survival and emergence.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I liked that last sentence especially, because that's the truth of it. And often those really big states are right next to each other. And it can be a lot for a whole family. And it can be, just a transformational experience where you access these deep spiritual parts of yourself, and they're right next to this deep life-death feeling that can happen. And they're just, they commingle, or often there's one, then the other. But when I listen to you, Abby, I start to dream. And I'm dreaming of really supporting families with this, with our model of care, with really understanding the autonomic nervous system. And I've started in my private practice something called family care, where I introduce how to work with your history and understanding your autonomic nervous system to pregnant families, or families wanting to conceive. And I feel like the newer data that I've read all around obstetricians and maternity care is that there's a real need to help families with this, because stress and threat and the things that happen for us while we're pregnant do leave neurodevelopmental markers on babies in utero. And that's why I feel a certain commitment and urgency and a real strong desire to find good models of care, practitioners that want to be trained, people that want to support families, because you can make a huge difference in the lives of families by just doing a few wonderful interventions around the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah, it's the relationship, and kind of developing the relationship with the autonomic nervous system for the caregivers also allows them to begin to be in relationship with the physiological rhythms of their infants and their children, which is really one of the primary languages that they're speaking. Excitation and settling cycles, heart rate to heart rate, biorhythm to biorhythm. And so we don't always need to be in sync. In fact, it's really important that there's different rupture and repair cycles, or we could be enhancing one another through harmony of different states. And then other times we'll be mirrored, or we'll be joined, right? And there'll be these states of growth that are happening for the capacity for affect regulation, feeling emotion, and then later that turns into more forms of expression, sense of selfhood. But this kind of language that we as the caregivers or within the families can learn to do really expands outward into a whole other, the language that the infants are already speaking.
Right.
Yeah.
And their primary language is physiology, their skin, their eyes, their face. their cry, their gesture, their posture. If you can really they'll tell you the story right from the get-go when you meet them. But the other thing I want to mention is that you can start this relationship with your baby during pregnancy. And you can also, as a provider, help women feel better in their bodies and then connect with their babies and themselves in a different way using the lens of the autonomic nervous system.
I just thought of a research study, which would be probably really interesting to do. So, some early research around in utero experiences that the mother will read a story to the baby in utero, and then after the baby is born, they show that suckling rates increase. Right, so there's some excitement, right, some engagement, and these are, really, really young, just born infants, right? They hear the prosody, they don't know the content of the story, but they know that story.
Yeah.
So they'll show that recognition through, what would that be? Excitatory. It would be sympathetic. It would be in the positive sort of valence, let's call it, in the positive feeling state. So, I wonder, as you teach people around the families, around regulating their nervous systems, if they begin to do that with the baby in utero, including, let me say something too about upregulating the nervous system, because a lot of the time we might feel despair or overwhelm or shut down, depression, right? Those would be states too that we want to help people to be able to upregulate, to have more energy, to be able to come out of some of that shutdown. But as the nervous system state becomes more regulated, what would that be like if you just have the parent do that once the baby then comes out into the world? And you will see that. They might not suckle in the same way, but you'll see that the nonverbal rhythm, let's call it, between the two. And there's something around explicitly learning to name the states that we feel to help you to identify, how am I feeling right now? What sensations are occurring in my body? Where might I place my attention that might be helpful for me and for my rhythm, or to attend to the state for long enough for it to shift, so I'm not abandoning it, really, right? And these are things that we often do as we get involved with our busyness, or from our own trauma, or from, like you're saying, the transgenerational piece,
right?
Urgency to just keep going, that we can really take that pause to deepen in. But I was just thinking, what a great physiological research study that would be if we were looking at some of those kinds of nonverbal communications.
Well, that's been done. That was the Dr. Seuss stories were read to children, to babies in utero. So definitely. And also music. I know that with my second child, I sang a lot. I taught a lot of classes to little children. I did that. And after I gave birth, I sang to my little one, my daughter, and I had a doula, and she was watching me. And my daughter cried a lot after she was born. And then I sang her one of the songs I sing to the children. I know she heard a lot. And the doula was surprised. She goes, "Your daughter knows this song." She could tell. I'm like, "Yeah, I sang it a lot. I sang it to her a lot." And so, I mean, I take care of a lot of pregnant moms, and they often will say that their babies in utero will respond really well to their siblings, especially bedtime stories and bedtime songs. And so you are a family, even before, you have your baby. That baby is listening, is participating, is really excited to be a part of the family, wants to be communicated with, and wants to be included. So I teach that, and we can talk about that in terms of the autonomic nervous system, but I feel more spacious and more relaxed just talking about it myself. So I don't know about you, Abby.
Yeah, same here. And when you were originally asking about, what happens before and during and after birth, there's also the experience of the baby, right? So there's the development of all of the different aspects of the body. You have your dorsal vagal system, or the all systems off, that develops first, and then you get a sympathetic system in order to move. And you have these ways in which the baby will respond through movement, right? I always loved how right at night time, when I would fall asleep a lot of the time, then all three of my babies inside, they would start moving around like, hey, this is you're relaxing and it's time for me to have a disco party,
Yeah.
right? But you're getting to know them, they're getting to know you, and they are innately a part of all of those rhythms. Things would get kind of noisy outside, right? And I could feel them quiet down, right? What's going on?
They're listening. Yeah.
They're listening. And as a trauma trainer, a lot of the time I made many different differentiation statements. And someone outside here is having a very big feeling right now, and they're doing some beautiful trauma resolution work.
Mhm.
And I'm okay, you're okay, right? You can
Not about
rest.
you, not about you.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have that inner communication, and then the ways that they're communicating to us, and it's such a gift to start to bring this kind of viewpoint in for birth educators,
Mhm.
trauma therapists, and the families whom we serve.
Right. Well, just to move at the questioning ahead a little, like I want to talk just about the impact of birth trauma, and which is what we're really going to talk about and teach about for people. And I really like, if there has been a lot of hurt or pain, or not a repair after rupture or intensity at births, and then the parents carry that, and the baby is carrying that, and there's nobody there naming and helping and regulating and help in a way that body workers I know can do, but also trauma therapists can, and midwives and nurses and people can recognize when the autonomic nervous system is speaking after births. So Abby and I were talking before just to try and orient to some of these questions, and what I commonly see as a woman will come into me and think that they've done something wrong, or why didn't they do something different? It must be that there's something bad or wrong about them, or maybe they're a bad or wrong parent, and they're spinning around in this sense of blame and shame on themselves. And I often have to call pauses, come in. That's when I lay out the layers of experience and help them orient to what happened in a different way. So the autonomic nervous system plays a huge role in how we respond to all the things that happen at births. And so it's a pretty big picture. And if we can help families heal quickly after difficult births, then they can all connect, including the baby, and then go on into their lives and thrive. So that's one of my missions here on planet Earth.
Hmm. Well, that just makes my heart grow in, the feeling of my heart in kind of, I can feel like a warm and almost like a pink glow as you say that,
Mm.
because it's exciting and it's so important. I think in the medicalization of birthing in our culture, there are so many things, so many measurements that are being tended to, that the experience of the birthing parent is so often missed. The emotional and the physiological immensity and intensity of what is unfolding for both the parent and the baby, right, is also often missed.
Right.
So when you talk about that, um, and also I think too sometimes a feeling of being robbed of agency,
Right.
right? And now, of course, we were going to counterbalance this, that the medical models also save a lot of people too in many difficult kinds of situations. So there's some sort of interface between the systems that are there and the safety that it's attempting to provide, but really looking at during. So for doulas, how essential it is for someone to really be there to validate, or even training whoever is going to, if there's the father is there or another parent is there, really training them in some ways to support watching, how, where is, anytime that we feel real or perceived threat, our bodies will often move into something that we would call the threat response cycle. So there's a startle, there's an orienting phase, there can be vocalization. We could go into fight, we could go into flight, we could go into freeze. And then, these events might pass and there's sort of a discharge or a release, or maybe if we're able to complete some of them. I mean, I'm thinking right now, I keep having this image of when one of my babies wasn't doing very well, and so they asked me to stop moving. They basically asked me to stay in one position. And my body, I wanted to move. I wanted to be walking. I wanted to be squatting. I could hum,
Right.
but I
my
started
God.
to go into this state of feeling more and more trapped.
Right.
Right. So I was both immobilized, and then I also had more sympathetic tone. Right. And
Right.
eventually I was able to get up and do a little bit more movement, and things started to shift and move along. But these are these moments where, consciously I knew that it would be better at that time for our son for me to not be moving. But in my body, I was like the tiger in the cage, right? I was pacing, and
Wanted to
I
taste.
was like,
Yeah.
get me out of here. I'm running out of here. I'm going under a tree. Leave me
Totally.
alone. Right? And so I had all of this flight physiology with immobilization. So, just even acknowledging, of course you wanted to pace. Of course
Yes.
your body needed to do that, even though your mind and everyone else is saying stop. And then we can hold that in the moment, validating, maybe even helping there being some movement or some ways to organize that. And then after the fact too, having those conversations really helpful once the parents work through what happened, to then also, and I know Kate, you do this, then work with it with the baby present, so the baby can start to tell their part of how they experience that sequence, which they will through their movement, through their biorhythms, through wakefulness and sleeping cycles, right? And this is not a way that a lot of people are trained to work.
Not yet.
Yes.
But when I listen to you, it's nice to hear, like you say, well, if we can come again with the parents after and just affirm, yes, of course that must have driven you crazy, or yes, of course that was overwhelming for you, and you didn't do anything wrong there. That was just what happened there. And what sometimes these things have to happen. Often I find, like you, parents, families feel very undermined, undercommunicated with. Often the staff just don't have time to do it, or they just don't have a habit of it in their hospitals yet. And so really we can find now these fine-tuning how to be with families during births. I've also had parents report to me that they went into please and appease in order to, like, because they felt under threat and they did whatever they were told, and they would come to me later and say, why didn't I speak up? And I'm like, well, this is how your nervous system protected you in that space.
Mm-hmm.
We can make repair right now for that. And sometimes that's what I do. I take the place of what maybe the authority could have or should sometimes say to families, but can't. And often families feel better right away after they see me. And this is what I'm wanting for people coming to get trained, just to feel empowered enough to affirm with people what happened. And you can do it in a balanced way, a way that feels good to every part of the space. And sometimes you do have to feel empowered with your family. Like, yeah, that was not okay. So, and just giving space for that is enough for them to put it down and not carry it. Because I find many women and men and partners will carry these difficult births their whole life, and then they'll tell their child the story, that was the worst day of my life.
Mm.
And that shouldn't be the story. But that's hard for a child to hear. And then they come in my space as the adult looking to heal their birth because they've been told their whole life that it was so bad. And they experienced it badly also.
Yeah, and as you're sharing the validation, and then also the validation, I would say, in the nervous system. It's so, as you remember
Mhm.
that moment, that difficult moment, what are you aware of in your body right now? And there might be some shaking or some trembling or some fear or some impulse to run or move or twist
Mhm.
that, for example, I was not able to, I chose not to move,
Mhm.
right? And I was not able to move for the perceived safety, whether that was true or not.
Right.
But I was then later able to shake and able to move and sort of push
Mhm.
away and
Right.
walk and feel my muscles kind of regaining a sense of agency, and so that I wasn't carrying that residual charge around. And that's so important because let's, for example, say that I'm nursing my baby later and I'm in a state where I have, their weight on me and I'm rocking back and forth and I become more immobile by choice. But my body begins to remember being with the baby in this state and not being able to move when I wanted to. And I
Mhm.
might begin to feel anxious,
Mhm.
right? Or disconnected, but not really know why. So these are some of the things that we can really do is both validating, and if there were words, what would your words say? If you could move your body as you think about that in any way, are you coming out of freeze? Are you coming out of high arousal? Can we allow spaciousness
Yeah.
for those things to complete so that it feels that it's in the past and it's not revisiting us in our child rearing,
Yes,
right?
I agree. And as practitioner, the quality of your presence, your own knowing, and your orientation to the health in their system, but also inside yourself, your presence. And so I find that I would like practitioners to know a lot more about what happens at births so they can affirm what they know. Like, yes, that was challenging. That's a very difficult pattern. Even just saying that to someone is affirming for them. Oh, no one has told me that. I felt that, but no one said anything. They just said, hey, you got a healthy baby. So you just as practitioner, if I could empower you, give you knowledge so that you feel so firm in your presence, and that will make a big difference as you're helping these families both before and after, or even during births, if you're a birth professional.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such essential work, and I continue to feel really excited to be collaborating with you both in the podcasts and then also in our upcoming workshop. And I think Kate and I have a wealth of knowledge from some different perspectives, and that both people who work in birthing and then also trauma therapists can really thrive in helping families to know more about.
About what happens here and the autonomic nervous system, and how we can both prepare and be with and then catch families afterwards. So, well, it's been great talking with you today, Abby. The time just went by so quick. I feel like we have so much more we could talk about, but I think that will be enough for today. Is there anything you would like to say to complete here?
Well, it's part of the journey, This is I'm really celebrating you, Kate, as you're birthing
Mhm.
many of your programs. It's great to see all of the excitement that's out there. Thank you all who are attending this podcast, who are curious about supporting birthing families and babies. And, let's continue to gather in communities and villages and to really support this new becoming in life because it's one of those most important thresholds So it's an honor to be here. Thank you, Kate, for inviting me, for being part of the podcast, and thank you for all of your sharing as well.
All right. All right, to be continued. We'll see you all in November if you come study with us, and maybe we'll have Abi back because, we didn't get to all of our questions.
Take care, everybody.
You've been listening to A More Beautiful Life podcast. To support our show, please go to Patreon /A More Beautiful Life.